You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, a podcast all about Star Trek, the next generation. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are talking about Sins of the Father. It first aired the week of March 19th, 1990. It was written by Ronald D. Moore and W. Reed Morgan, which sounds like a made-up name. James, what happens in this one?
Remember that really fun episode when Riker was the first officer on the Klingon ship? Well, this is the opposite of that. The Klingon Kurn becomes the first officer of the Enterprise as part of the exchange program, but he has an ulterior motive for being there. Turns out he's Worf's brother. Who knew? He needs Worf to go home because their father has been accused of treason, thus dishonouring their house. Picard decides to stop ferrying around dignitaries or scanning phenomena to bugger off to the Klingon homeworld. Some stuff happens, there's a conspiracy, some truth is revealed, then it ends with Worf as an outcast, which he was already anyway.
So Alex, you hadn't seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
Well, it started and I thought, they're literally doing the opposite of what they did in that other episode. And it petered along for a bit, and I thought, it's okay, I can sort of go with this. Then they went and saw all the other Klingons, and my brain sort of wandered through to the end with some leaps of logic along the way, and then it was over.
Yeah. I know a lot of people like this episode, and kind of like the big Klingon episodes in general. Ronald D. Moore, very good writer. He's a big fan of working with the Klingons, and I kind of get what they're going for. It's almost like a Greek play, this, it's playing with very broad, big themes about betrayal and family and honour. But, God, I don't care. Like, I really, really do not care about Worf's honour or his father, or what happened at Kittimar, or the Duras family. Do you know what? I don't even know what happened, and I've watched this multiple times. I don't really know what the resolution was. I sort of know that Worf's family didn't betray, but someone did, and they're powerful, and it would cause civil war, maybe. But Jesus, like, I really am not bothered.
I've watched this whole episode. I've listened to James describing the plot, and I still can't get out of my head that every time someone says Kittimar, for some reason my brain replaces it with Kettering. And I'm just picturing Worf in Kettering. Maybe it's some sort of afternoon tea. Klingon afternoon tea.
A Klingon tea is poisonous to humans,
The sandwiches are a bit shit as well.
This is probably strange in that it is a very popular episode. I mean, they had that Blu-ray sampler, and they chose Encounter at Farpoint just because it was the first episode, and they chose this and The Inner Light, which is a season 5 episode, which is very, very popular, to represent the best of Next Generation on Blu-ray, so to sell the big, very expensive season box sets. And probably all three of us are incredibly underwhelmed by this episode. It's very unfortunate that we've trundled along with episodes that were absolute rubbish, that we get to one that is pretty much universally loved, and we are massively underwhelmed.
It's just a bit dull, I'll be honest with you. And like you said, Andrew, I don't really care. I mean, I get that we're supposed to see the Klingon culture is different, and we're these are their ways, these are our ways, and we will stick to them. But fine, do what you want. I mean, we'll just wait over here for you to finish.
This episode is important in laying a groundwork for a lot of very good episodes later on.
Oh God, really?
No, genuinely, really, and particularly in Deep Space Nine, the Klingon culture is very interesting in later episodes. Believe me, trust me. I don't think you can. I think you still think the Klingons are racist.
Well, it's not that they're racist, it's that I feel that a lot of easy touchstones are perhaps laid onto the characters as a sort of broad basis of, oh, look, different culture, without really thinking it through. But I don't think it's all bad. You know, I think there are some nice touches while they're aboard the Enterprise. It's once they get off it that I start to lose the will to live a bit, that's all. I mean, and that's not to say it's not without fault on the Enterprise, because some of it is quite laboured. Basically, any time that Worf and his brother are interacting, that's quite laboured. But the stuff with the meat, yeah, that's all fine. But ultimately, it's throwaway, it's disposable. It has no real impact on the rest of the episode. And I think, really, on the basis of that, I would have much preferred seeing an episode which genuinely was a reversal of the episode that we saw previously, with a Klingon coming on board the Enterprise and struggling to take command. I genuinely think I would have preferred to see that, and that depresses me.
That Riker episode was so good. I mean, that was probably one of the high points of season 2, and it was really entertaining. You know, again, it was actually quite disposable, but I think this is meant to be really deep, and you know, it's meant to have some kind of turmoil. But I don't feel you can ever really penetrate Worf. I don't feel you ever get under the skin of his sort of emotional conflict, or why his father's reputation matters, or actually what it means for him to have a brother. There isn't any emotional outpouring or any grand declaration, or I don't know, there's no undertones. It's just very much what you see is what you get. It's like, what is this episode actually about, other than going to Klingon and doing a trial? I don't get any more depth from it than that.
I think the issue is that this episode is only important in hindsight. It's only the fact that this lays the groundwork for us to have many episodes about Worf's background.
Oh, God.
Many very good episodes. And we can appreciate that this is the beginning of Star Trek The Next Generation telling stories over multiple episodes.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's not bound to a single 45 minutes.
There is stuff going on here, and I think introducing Worf's extended family, yeah, that should be quite interesting. Sort of setting up a recurring enemy as well, I guess quite interesting, but I feel it sort of suffers somewhat a bit from like sort of Star Wars Episode 1 syndrome, in that, you know, there's a lot of talk of honour, and they're sort of standing in courtrooms making grand declarations, and you know, if I've got Klingons, I really want to see them fighting with batlifts and being kind of cool.
Oh, actually, I would draw a parallel with another sci-fi franchise, and perhaps even more so its film adaptation, which is that whenever I see the Klingons and we start going into these long, extended lectures about honour and families and houses, I end up thinking of Dune. And I'll be honest with you, I really hate Dune. And I know that, you know, it's one of the touchstones of science fiction, and on that basis I should probably be burned at the stake for saying Dune's really bloody dull. I mean, to me it always feels sort of Game of Thrones in space. The different houses and their conflict, and I just don't care. I really don't. It's the... Do you know what it is? It feels like too much fantasy in my sci-fi, which doesn't necessarily have to be an issue, because let's face it, something like Star Wars is fully fantasy but set in sci-fi. It's a particular brand of fantasy that is this whole sort of honour between houses, and I find it so very tedious. So when you have an episode like this where half of the runtime, in fact it's probably over half, is dedicated to that, my brain just wanders, especially when it does take leaps of logic at various points in the episode where it just jumps to something else and you go, oh, okay, we're dealing with this now. Oh, and here's a different Klingon. The nanny's not really in character with the rest of the Klingon race. Oh, well, she's gone. Oh, well. Oh, and the episode's finished. That was my experience, really.
You have this very personal story in some ways, where it is Worf's father, who he doesn't know, who he doesn't remember, has been accused of doing something in the past, okay? And then you think, okay, well, it's going to be Worf and his brother riding off to Klingon. And then Picard goes, no, let's all go. Let's have a holiday. And I just think, how does the Enterprise operate? Can it just literally can he just decide, well, one of my crew is having personal issues, I guess we'll just all have to go to their home planet and hang out there. And that sort of took me out of it a bit. It shouldn't bother me, but it does bother me a little bit. It sort of seems a bit. It seems a bit of a false note to me.
Would you have liked it if there was a scene where Picard had to convince an admiral that there was some sort of crisis on Klingon, and they had to pretend that something was going wrong there? They had to be there.
Yes. It's a sort of stupid little niggly problem that also stops me from liking Descent, which is generally regarded as one of the best of Star Trek Next Generation as well. But I can't get over a little niggle in that as well, which we'll get to in 7 or 8, maybe 12 years. But yeah, that sort of bothers me. But I know Picard's kind of... He is both an honourable man and a soldier, and let's not get too obsessed with that.
But the thing is, the show is so obsessed with honour, and I feel that sometimes they go against what they're trying to present, and that's not to say that you can't have multifaceted characters, but when you try and present a race as sort of, well, let's be honest, kind of one note, and that's always been my sticking point with the Klingons. Everything in this episode revolves around the honour, but it's okay to go and stab someone to keep a political plot going. I don't know, somehow that feels contradictory to me.
Can we talk about the political plot?
I mean, you're more than welcome to. I'm not sure that I can remember it. It happened.
Okay, I might be getting this wrong. Okay, so basically, the Duras family have accused Moog, and by extension the House of Moog, of treason for, at Kittimer, betraying the Klingon Empire to the Romulans. Fine, that all makes sense. It turns out it was actually the father of Duras, Worf's accuser, that was the perpetrator of this treason, and they're now powerful in the Klingon Empire. Now, before that accusation was made, nobody knew anything about it, and nobody cared. So why did everyone not just keep quiet?
Well, they did know about it because somebody had to take the blame.
Oh. Right. But why now?
Because the son of Moog has arrived and revealed himself.
Why does that sound like the opening lyrics to some sort of musical in the style of Hair? The son of Moog has revealed himself.
Ken knows that his family's reputation is wrongly being destroyed on Klingon. So he gets Worf as the only legitimate son of Moog to go to the Klingon homeworld and try and put it right.
I genuinely think that June is easier to follow than this.
I don't think it's very complicated, really.
I don't think it's complicated. I just don't think it's very well explained. That's the problem I have.
I don't think it's complicated. I think it's really, really simple. And it's pretending to be complicated with all the sort of cloak and dagger and old woman who was dead but's actually alive. And
doesn't know how to act as a Klingon.
But the whole thing is, like, I thought she was dead. No, I looked her up in the phone book. She's fine. And it's just like, you go... and then you go and meet her, and it's fine. It's like, I am dead. And it's like, have you just been hanging out in that room for the last, 30 years? Like, I don't understand the kind of... the greater... why this is sort of a greater mystery. I don't understand why Moog hasn't been accused formally before this point. And I know Worf hasn't actually arrived, but they were going to dishonour him anyway behind his back, but they didn't need to do that. Did they need to blame anyone? Could they not have just blamed, I don't know, some bad communication satellites?
That phrase sums up everything that I'm really just so bored with. They were going to dishonour him behind his back. Doesn't that just make everything sound so bloody petty? And I get that that's the point, but that doesn't make it interesting.
Well, the Duras family are petty, and they are traitors to the Klingons. So I can fully understand that they would have petty motives to try and force Moog to be revealed as a traitor with the evidence that there is. So in that sense I can understand it. I think it justifies the plot in that sense.
I don't know. I don't feel I get enough from Worf in this episode. Would probably be my biggest issue. I think there's the elements there to make it interesting, albeit I don't really care about the Klingon homeworld in any way. This whole idea that Worf isn't quite Klingon, that he's neither one thing nor the other, that he's not human, he's not Klingon, there's nowhere he actually fits in. That's interesting. I don't feel we get any of that here. It's just, I am Klingon. Look, I've got my kind of roby thing, and I know all the ceremonies, and I've got the words, and I can throw a table down like no one else. But it's so alien, or it's so alienating, that there's no way in for me as a viewer. There's no way for me to fully appreciate these relationships, or know the power of dishonour, or the joy of finding family, or any of that. And it's really big, and it's like, this is supposed to be epic, and I'm left cold, and I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over and over again, because I can't remember any of the scenes other than the one where the birds had been left out too long in the sun, which, I don't know, just sounds like a bit of a kind of, I don't know, I just hate that line, as if cooking with fire didn't exist in any culture.
But you're right on about the point about, just saying the same thing over and over. The reason is, it's not bad, it's just not interesting. There's no meat to get at to discuss. And yet it seems that there should be, but there's just nothing interesting to latch onto. And you say about, this is clearly supposed to be a sort of big episode for them. And yeah, you get that sense. I mean, even with the model shots earlier on, not just reusing model shots we've seen before, as has happened on occasion previously. It goes to that, and you start to think, oh, okay, we're getting a bit more of an expanse. No, not really. We're just going to be in some dark rooms discussing things. And I realised that is perhaps something that describes Star Trek The Next Generation overall. People in a room discussing politics. But that doesn't have to be dull, and we have seen occasions where it is not. We've seen Measure of a Man. This is not that.
I feel a bit like it does the same thing over and over again. You have Kurn going down and having a confrontation and getting stabbed. And that's sort of, oh, there's another layer to this, and it's sort of like, what is that layer? I don't feel I'm getting anything from that. And then you've got Picard going down a shadowy corridor and meeting an old woman, and then almost getting stabbed, and all these little bits, all these kind of chats in rooms, which is exactly what it is. I don't feel like there's a grand uncovering of the mystery. Someone betrayed. It wasn't who they said it was, and I think I want a little bit more from my big kind of mystery than that. It's just they're accusing the wrong man for political gain, and I just it's not a mystery. It's boring.
I wonder if part of the problem is that they want to tell this grandiose story, and it's difficult enough to do that in 45 minutes. But actually, they spend the first 15 minutes with just a Klingon trying to be an officer on the Enterprise. They kind of stymie themselves by having to almost rush the second 2 acts of the episode.
But I don't know if the second 2 acts would benefit from being longer. I feel that it's not so much that they're rushing from thing to thing, it's that they sort of make these jumps in logic of, oh, so this must mean this. And it's not so much we need to speed through the plot, it's just that we're going to do this now. And it's all tied up with what there always seems to be, which is an attempt to make the Klingons, as much as sort of make the Klingons a sort of alien culture, to make the Klingons almost sort of have a sort of Shakespearean edge, I would say. Now, I mean, obviously, you would draw parallels with that, with the fact that they, in the movies, take lines. Obviously, in the Undiscovered Country would be the most obvious. But there does seem to be that sort of thing running through the way that they're written quite often. Someone trying to bring in what they believe would be some sort of Shakespearean traits to this race. And it just feels... It feels to me like someone trying to bring what they believe is a sort of Sherlock Holmes edge to something by writing in the phrase elementary quite a lot.
It is that Shakespearean thing. I think it is. It's sort of meant to be a tragedy. And you know what? If you are going to play with these broad sweeps, then you need to have a broad kind of action. And at the end is such an anticlimax, isn't it? What happens? Well, some Klingons are going to do an 80s dance move at your Worf. Like, they needed... Like, Kurn should have been executed. Something really horrible should have happened. Because they are doing all that tragedy stuff, and then at the end it's like, well, we'll come back and resolve this on another occasion.
It's remarkably anticlimactic. Well, I'm afraid that that's the way our laws are, so you're still going to have to die. Well, what if I resign? Well, yes, that would be entirely acceptable, and you could, of course, leave. Oh, well, I'll do that. But this isn't over. What? I mean, I almost couldn't believe when that happened. I'll be honest with you.
You know, shall I remind you that this is quite a popular episode?
I'm sure we've had this before, where we've seen some very popular episodes and we just sat there in disbelief.
It's got elements that should be interesting, or should be more interesting than they are. And we are still very much in episodic mode, is what I would say, in terms of Star Trek. And them sort of transitioning towards the bigger plot arcs, I'm not sure if that's quite going smoothly, because if you're thinking episodic, and then you've kind of got an unresolved, not a cliffhanger, but certainly a thread that's going to need a bit more exploration, and you're sort of thinking, well, I don't know if I really want to explore this anymore anyway. I sort of appreciate why people like it, but I'm sure they think it's better than that. but I'd need them to sit me down and explain it with charts, because I can't see it.
I can see why people like it so much, and I do think a lot of it is hindsight, with a lot of the later episodes which are inspired by this episode. But at the same time, I put the episode on remembering it's a popular episode and thinking, I don't remember too much about this. I'll probably enjoy it, and didn't end up enjoying it anywhere near as much as I thought I would.
And with no knowledge of what's to come on that front, I can only watch it as a progressing story. And the only way that I could see you could enjoy this episode is if you're really invested in Klingons as a race, as a character type, and as a continuing story. And frankly, I'm not. We've been presented with so few occasions where that's been an interesting episode strand. In fact, really, I can only think of one. And it's the episode that this episode emulates at the start. And the fact that it moves away from that, I think, as I said before, it just moves away from where it was strongest.
That does all feel so unresolved, though, because those scenes where you've got Wesley going, "Oh man, he's always getting on my case, I don't like it," and Geordi being upset, and it feels like these are elements of a draft of the script that got thrown out. It was two scripts that were put together. One which was, Worf's father gets accused of something, and the other was Worf as a brother. And I can't help but feel that they've not quite been welded together as successfully as they might have been.
No, I entirely agree with that. It is an episode of two halves, and as I've said before, once we hit the second half, I just lost all interest. And I can't work up an enthusiasm to be more positive about it, because I wasn't. The minute that your attention starts to wander, that you start to look at the clock, you start to think, "Oh, have I had an email come in?" You're not invested in the episode, and I think that's the most damning summation that we can find, really.
Actually, that was one strange moment. I seem to remember they go at 1/4 impulse.
It's 1/3 impulse, and the ship goes really fast.
Why, Geordi, this is much more fuel efficient. Why aren't we normally going at this speed?
There's been a horrific natural disaster on Riser. Millions of people are dying. We need to get there now. 2/3 impulse.
That's all I've got to say about it. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
Jesus, no.
Maybe if we'd had more Worf episodes, because all of what we know about the Klingons is generally through Worf. If we had more episodes about him and him trying to discover his Klingon heritage and not be a rubbish episode, then we will have cared more at this point about the Klingons in general, which I think is part of the reason why people appreciate it in hindsight, because we have episodes later on which aren't Worf being hit by pain sticks. They care about Worf, and they care about his honour, because Worf cares about it, and we care about Worf. At this point in time, all there is poisonous tea and pain sticks. That's all we know about the Klingons, except for Riker's exchange in Season 2. So, we don't really have much to care about, really. I'm trying to defend a very popular episode. If somebody doesn't defend it, then they will get angry in the reviews.
Anyway, let's round up some spare parts in the section we like to call Quickfire.
Quickfire.
So, obviously this episode is fairly tedious, but can it be outdone by the tedium of the Nitpicker's Guide? I try not to turn back to it too often, but you kind of have to in this situation. And I have to say, they've really outdone themselves. They have dual points, both of which do rival the episode, I do have to say. The first being, someone needs to replace the light bulbs in the transporter room. When Kurn beams aboard the Enterprise, the transporter platform is very dark. Did he call the transporter chief to tell him he wanted to make a dramatic entrance? Or maybe the show had a lighting director. The second point is, when Picard prepares a meal for Kurn in the captain's mess, Picard replicates a variety of foods for Kurn to sample. One of them is a roast turkey. The scene follows Picard beautifully carving up the browned bird. Apparently, the turkey has bones in it. Why would replicators aboard the Enterprise replicate bones? The bones make it more difficult to cut the meat. They're also thrown away, unless Picard makes soup out of them. Doesn't this seem like a waste of energy? He must be a real stickler for authenticity. Yeah, or maybe he doesn't like just carving through a solid block of meat like a sort of tofu replication. Just bugger off.
On the subject of Picard's buffet, not a single pork pie, sausage roll, triangular sandwich. We're really not getting the authentic human buffet there. I have to say I was really disappointed by that. They say that they're all progressive and you know, this is the utopian future. If the utopian future doesn't have pork pies cut in half and sausage rolls, then I don't want to be part of that future.
Yeah, I'll agree. Give me pineapple chunks and cheese on little sticks and I'll give it an extra warp core out of 10.
Tony Todd, Candyman, plays Kurn. He'll reprise this role in TNG and Deep Space Nine. He also plays an old man version of Jake Sisko in Deep Space Nine, which is among the worst of Star Trek's aging makeups. Something that they do badly on multiple occasions.
A superb episode, I seem to remember.
A stunning episode, but again, it's something that kind of bothers me a little bit. One, because he doesn't really look anything like Cyril Lofton, who plays standard age Jake Sisko. And two, because like they've made him up to be an old man, and it's bad. But hey, doesn't matter. He's part of the Star Trek family, and we love him.
Turning to one of our other book sources, we have as many as 4 books. Star Trek 365 states that Worf's leading role in Sins of the Father broke through the glass ceiling between the upper and lower tiers of characters. It became possible for any of the main characters to carry an entire episode, to have a continuing storyline. In that sense, TNG proved to be far more egalitarian than its predecessor and set the course for future Star Trek series. What a load of bollocks. We've clearly had episodes before now that have featured lower ranked characters. Even Tasha Yar has had an episode largely focused around her. Just what utter tripe.
We've had sort of episodes focusing on the characters, but is this the one that sort of, you know, Worf is completely driving the plot, as in it's about his family?
I reckon Geordie's had a few episodes like that, though.
That episode where he fell in love with the hologram.
I mean, I don't think Geordie should be driving anything, because, you know, he's on limited vision, frankly.
Yeah, so the writer that I mentioned previously has no other credits on Star Trek before, but has written episodes of Baywatch, Simon and Simon, Swamp Thing, Silk Stockings, and MacGyver. That's W. Reed Moran. Picard wears a little Obi-Wan Kenobi type robe to hide in the Klingon Empire. That's funny.
Don't mind me, everyone. I'll just wait in the shadows.
When they give the order to go to Klingon, he says, to the first imperial city of the Klingon Empire. Imperial meaning relating to empire. I thought that was a bit of a tautology there. Well, thanks for listening. I'm sorry if we didn't like your favourite episode, but do keep listening, because we might have some opinions that you do like. And if you would like us to express those, why not leave us a review on iTunes, or visit our website at thespoilist.com. Anyway, next time we'll be talking about allegiance, and that's going to be very exciting for all of us. But until then, goodbye.
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 One-star review. They were mean about sins of the father.